Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. It's a little after 7:30, so we thought we'd get started. This is my third year at the Arts Center, and one of the biggest things that happens when you work at the Arts Center and you're new is the community comes in and tells you stories about the Arts Center. And if they were a child or an adult or what they did here, and it had so much meaning to each person that has talked to me about it. So we learned of the Colgate Upstate Institute from Adirondack Nonprofit Network in an email, and we applied. And we also have to give big thanks to George, because part of this project also was supposed to be the costume project. But the history project became so large that Eli never moved on to the theater portion or the costume portion and devoted his time here to the history project. Eli leaves next Thursday. So how long were you here? I guess
8.5 weeks.
8.5 weeks. Everything is paid for by the Colgate Upstate Institute. He is a Colgate Fellow. He is paid by Colgate, and he is housed by Colgate. So he is presently staying in Saranac Lake at Northern Country Community College with 2 other fellows. And we're lucky to have another Colgate Fellow here with us, Emma Herwig. She has been working at the Adirondack Experience. I believe she's been working with the curator there. So we're very thankful to Colgate for that. Now, in the Adirondacks, this is made possible by a donor who pays for all the Colgate Fellows. We do not know that person's name, but we hope to learn that person's name so we can thank them, because this has been a wonderful project for the Arts Center and the community. A big part of this project is also the volunteers. Marty Evanoff, Lenore Maynard, Annabelle Anderson, who works at the museum. She came over to help us on her off hours, and Boca Baglieri. We also really want to thank Jenny Ambrose as well, who is the historian at the Adirondack Experience. If you have not met her as well, she's here in the audience. She made the Arts Center ALCA files available to Eli and really helped him out while he was there. So thank you, Jenny, as well. I think that's it. We just really want to thank everyone, and especially to thank Eli for being here and putting up with us. As you know, the Arts Center can be a little quirky, and he's just rolled with us the whole time. And there were tons of boxes in this building, in the eaves and whatnot, that the volunteers took out. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the presentation upstairs in the front gallery room, please do that. So, Eli, it's thank you. You've been a delight to work with, and we'll leave it to him.
Is my mic on? All right, it sounds like it is. So, hello everyone, my name is Eli. Thank you, Jean Marie. It's been really exciting to be here, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking me in and welcoming me with such open arms. And I feel as though I'm the lucky one who gets to learn about this really special place, this really great community, and try to give as much as I can in the 10 weeks that I'm here. So, as Jean Marie said, I've been working on the history project here. I just graduated from Colgate University. I'll go a little bit more into my background and how I ended up here momentarily. But with that, we'll get started. Go to the next slide, please. So this presentation is going to be broken down into a few different components. We'll start with the introduction, introducing myself, what the project is, give some context about the project, what our goals are with it, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I've been doing here, and then the very special part is the overview of all the historical findings, which isn't everything, but is as much that I could fit into this presentation tonight with some really notable highlights. So I'm excited to get started. For the next slide, please. So, as I said, I graduated this year. I'm very excited to be here in the Adirondacks through the Upstate Institute. I was looking for work in historical research. I've also have a background in museum creation, which isn't really something I had to do here, but what I have experienced at Colgate is doing 3 semesters of an oral history project for Colgate University, and I saw that this listing included a lot about doing oral histories, and that really excited me because that's one of my favorite things to do, is just talking to people, getting to know their stories, and I think that is one of the most impactful ways to do history, is just to talk to people in their everyday lives and their connections within the local community. And that's partly why I was drawn here, for sure, and really want to thank the Art Center for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and we should just go right into it then. Next slide, please. All right, so what is the History Project? Ultimately, we're trying to preserve the rich history of the Art Center. And as Jean-Marie was saying, there's boxes and boxes and boxes here. And I helped a little bit through organizing that, but that was mostly the volunteers here, which has been tremendously helpful for me, so thank you. Because then what I did with that was help to establish this digital database that the oral histories became the center of what I was doing here, but also going through a lot of our old materials, which include pamphlets, posters, tons of amazing photographs, and trying to organize them by year, understanding who and what is going on in those pictures. And the best way that we can even do that is just to talk to people who've been here and know what's going on. So if at any point, by the way, if anyone has any questions or wants to interrupt me if I get something wrong, if you want to share with the room like what's going on in a certain photo or any memory you have about it, that would be really cool. That's what we're really after as well. In addition to that, we're thinking about how we're going to store these records in the future. So in other words, archiving them. We're also thinking about how to archive the oral histories that I've been collecting. I've done 7 interviews this summer with a total of 9 people. Nine or so people. A couple interviews had 2 people each. And that's been the bulk of what I've been doing, is preparing to talk to folks like previous directors, people who are children here in the community, or in the areas, surrounding areas, artists who have worked here, and people just like that. I think it'd be such a cool project to continue in the future, because I was only able to do 7 interviews, and there's so many more that could be done. We're also going to think about moving forward, how we're going to catalog everything, how we're going to archive it, so hopefully 57 years from now, these records are available probably on the internet. That's probably where it's going to go, so that people can always have access to it and never forget this really important history. I'm also working on doing a temporary webpage for the Art Center's website about the history, about what we've been finding over the last 57 years. That webpage I'm really excited about because I'm going to incorporate audio excerpts from the oral histories on there. I have quotes and writing, I'm going to have lots of text, lots of pictures. Hopefully it's going to be really engaging and exciting. That's still in the works, and that's what I'm going to be finishing up in the next week and 1 day. And then I'm also thinking about the future. How do we help the Art Center prepare for this ongoing project, and how do we set the Art Center up to make sure that the records are being stored properly and that things aren't being thrown away and that we're holding on to this really rich history. Move on to the next slide, please. So why is this important? First of all, it's really important to know the local history of this place, absolutely crucial. And it's also really cool to look at these photographs and say like, oh my gosh, that's me, or I remember that, I was there, and think like, whoa, like, I just find it really important that people can see themselves in the history of their community and their friends and their neighbors and their parents and grandfathers and everything like that. That's one reason why it matters. And another reason is documenting the lasting impact of the Adirondack, I'll just say ALCA, of ALCA in the region. It's undeniable. Hopefully you'll see what I mean if you don't already agree with me, that its impact has been completely enormous for the Adirondacks, and it's completely transformed this area forever. And this place wouldn't be what it is today without the Art Center, and I think it's really important to document that so people can learn about that history, and so that the Art Center can continue in its really great mission and just keep it doing what it does best, which is bring people together for some really cool art events and fostering community, fostering culture, things like that. Also, as I said, this is a very essential component of the Adirondack region's history and should be documented, and people should know why it matters so much to so many different people across a long time. Go to the next slide, please. So what have I been doing here? A lot of organization, building that digital database a little bit. The oral histories have been the bulk of my work, like I said. Just to give you a glimpse into like what those kind of look like sometimes people would come here and I would speak to them here. I've been recording on my cell phone, which is cool. Makes it pretty easy, and the audio quality, I'd say, is pretty good. Been speaking to people about their experiences with the Art Center, and sometimes that just includes some really great childhood memories. Other times that includes, especially from past directors, what they've done for the Art Center and giving us a glimpse into how the Art Center has evolved over time, which has really informed much of this historical research and what we're going to talk about in the presentation today. I've also collaborated with Adirondack Experience a few times. Thank you, Jenny. It's been really great to work with you. Looking through a lot of their materials about the Art Center, that some of which we don't have here, especially from the years of 68 to, I want to say 73 or so. That's been really great. And if any of you were at the open house, which I sadly could not be at, there's a really wonderful slideshow with about 200 photos that I spent 2 days scanning at the museum. So I want to say thank you for that again. It's part of what I've been up to. Also working on that webpage, and most of all, it's been really great to work with so many different people and connect with so many of you here today. It's just been, as someone who's not from here, I think that I really needed to just talk to people, get a sense of what's going on here, why it matters so much, and that is also something that has hugely informed my research, especially as an outsider. So thank you all for connecting with me and taking me in. Next slide, please. Just some fun pictures. These are the kinds of things I've been looking at. This is a massive summer events pamphlet from 1981. You can tell every single year kind of looks like this, so it's going to be a very, very long process of whoever succeeds me and the history volunteers and whoever else works on this project in the future, going through these events. That digital database I was talking about tries to document who each artist was that was here, what event was going on, what was the event, was it art instruction, was it dancing, was it a coffee house, was it anything else in between, was it Shakespeare in the Park, things like that. And so one day, hopefully, we can have that all in a database online. We can easily analyze that data and see, A, who we've all worked with, who the Art Center's all worked with over its rich history, and also what kinds of events it has been putting on and how that's changed over time. So that's a future project for sure. Next slide, please. So what we found. These are some fun photos. If anyone knows what's going on here and wants to comment, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Cool. We'll go on to the next slide then, please.
In the middle, Jim, that's printing money.
Oh, yeah. What's going on there?
It's called fundraising.
Fundraising. Should bring that back, right? All right. Well, we'll see what else we have in store here, what other fun things are going on. Well, we'll start with the early days. So sorry, am I doing that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Let's pause and just try. Alright, want to try it again?
Hello, how does that sound? Hopefully better.
Better, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's start with the early days, before the Art Center was even born, and this is something that some people in this room will definitely be able to comment on more than me, but from what I found speaking to some of you and what we found in old newspaper clippings and things like that, this we've been able to gather. The first few meetings to talk about establishing an art center in Blue Mountain Lake were held in 1967, and I thought it was really cool that they were held at the Adirondack Museum and Indian Lake Central School. This goes to show that the Art Center has always been a collaborative effort within the surrounding communities, and it has continued to serve in that role for the past almost 6 decades. These meetings were basically with a group of, at first, around 27 people, I believe, and then it almost doubled in size, if not doubled in size entirely for the next meeting, talking about the community desire to have an art center here. Why would people want this here? What would it do for the full-time residents? What would it do for the seasonal residents? And a lot of those conversations included talking about how there wasn't really something like this in the region prior, and it was really important to have an art center here. Think about the kind of arts and culture that can be brought to this region that would otherwise be inaccessible just due to geography here. We're not really close to any major urban centers. So the art center, this was really cool, and I find it like a radical idea for the time for sure. Like, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do here. And this is a great way to bring people together, foster appreciation for the arts, and also support local artists. Shortly after that, in August of 1967, the Adirondack Lakes Council of the Arts applied for the charter to found the Art Center. There's a lot of people involved with that, one of whom was Margaret Henry, of course. She was definitely leading the charge from what I gathered, or one of the many people working to lead the charge to establish the Art Center. And she was also really part of the process where Harold, please correct me if I mispronounce his name, Hochschild, donated the Fuller Garage building, which this used to be a garage. And there's going to be some photos of it on the next slide, which are pretty cool. So the building was donated in '67, and then some renovations began in '68. Programming also promptly began in 1968 as well. Go on to the next slide, please. Some cool pictures of Fuller's garage. Imagine that before it was an art center. You got some gas pumps, you got some really cool cars. I love these pictures. And in those days, of course, the Art Center was collaborating with anybody that would be a part of this really cool project. You have the museum, New York State Council of the Arts, North Country Economic and Cultural Council, and the State Board of Cooperative Extension Services to help get this place up and running, which I also think is a really cool part of that history because, again, Art Center doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always been working with people around them to make this place a reality. Next slide, please. Initially, the money was raised entirely locally, from what I've been able to find, which is really amazing. People really came together to fund this place, make it get off the ground, which I think is a really neat part of the story. Jim and Sheila Hutt, of course, became the first co-directors of this place. Jim, I hope that's a picture of you, not somebody else, but that's all right. That's what we were thinking as well. And Jim and Sheila informed me that the Art Center's name is impactful because it's the Adirondack Lakes Center of the Arts, it's not the Mountain Lakes Center for the Arts, and from what I've been told, that is because they wanted to emphasize the importance of bringing together all the surrounding communities to have an art center here and not just have it be Blue Mountain Lake, but have it be all the surrounding lakes as well, which I think, again, really cool, bring people together from the very, very beginning. Next slide, please. So now we're getting into the 1960s. We have a variety of programming and arts instruction right off the bat. We've got arts instruction in jewelry, woodworking, watercolor, modern dance, things like that. Just really took off the diverse range of programming that are appealing to a variety of people. Also, other programming included film screenings. There's a lot of concerts that are being brought here. And of course, those two things became a huge part of what the Art Center does. And concerts, of course, we still do today. And I included this picture of the Adirondack Champlain Music Festival because this existed prior to the establishment of the Art Center. And this I didn't actually hear about from anybody, but I thought it was really cool that in 1968, the Art Center became a part of this event that had spanned a lot of different communities in the Adirondacks that had been going on for about 10 years prior. So immediately the Art Center became a presence. It was already engaging with so many different people, even those that are quite a drive away. Also, right off the bat, this place was going to be a community center. That's what everybody wanted. This was going to bring people together, and it was especially going to be a place for families and children. Preschool got started either in the late 60s or the early 70s, and please correct me if I'm late 60s. 1970 or late 60s? Oh, 1970, great. So the preschool is a huge part of what the Art Center did, and this was a really important, another really important role that the Art Center played in the community. There were no other preschools around, so the preschool was here, and a lot of kids got to experience that and grew up having those memories of being here at a very young age, and I'm sure that was incredibly impactful. Also in the 60s, you were seeing a lot of newspaper coverage from the local papers around here talking about this exciting new venture and how all these new programs that they were running were being well attended and that people were really excited about them, and that's really clear from all the newspaper clippings that I've been able to look at. It was also, as briefly touched on, a unique presence in the region. Not much else, if anything else like this, for quite some time. So the Art Center is really the place to go for any kind of entertainment, any kind of education, and just bring people together as a community. And funding remains still mostly local, which is also amazing. Next slide, please. Some other fun pictures. This is Carl Carburetor, the race. So I love these pictures of the kids. They're always so happy in them. Paul, sorry? Paul Taylor Dance Company. Wow, that's an amazing photo too. Great. Next slide, please. Those are both from the 60s. Now we're moving to the 70s. And Stan Getz was here, which I love Stan Getz. This has been one of the most exciting things for me to learn about. It would have been amazing to see him here. Back in 1973 is when he was here. Like it says, Art Center continued with their excellent programming. Lots of concerts, film screenings, arts instruction. That all continued. Theater was also really starting to pick up at that time. I believe Shakespeare in the Park was started around this time. He started to become very popular. Correct me if I'm wrong. Started later. Okay, this is great.
We had theater almost every Sunday night. They came, what was that theater group, Sheila? They came on Sunday nights and presented. That was wonderful.
Okay, so not for a while. This is good to know. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is filling in the gaps that we have currently, so this is really great.
May I just add something to Stan?
Yeah.
Sheila, could you stand up and speak to the audience? Thank you.
Picked up Stan Getz, a quartet and a band. Delivered him to the Hedges, his group to the Hedges. The Hedges and Potter was so gracious. They always house musicians for free. And I picked him up at a concert. He was stoned out of his And he kept calling to Jim in the audience. Where's Jim? Read this. And at one point, Jim goes back and he says, I need my tea. I said, tea? So Ellen Dwyer, one of the pottery instructors, said, oh, I have a coil where we can heat up the tea. So Jim gives Stan Getz a cup of tea. He almost died. He thought it was iced tea. So that concert gave me a major headache.
Me too.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's in the oral history too. So that's great to have documented forever.
And Odetta came when we were looking for the murderer.
Wow. That's wild.
Robert Hero.
Did
He
Judy
did not come
Jameson
to the
dance with Paul Taylor?
Pardon me?
Did Judy Jameson dance with Paul Taylor?
Because
Because, well, she came to Princeton and I talked to her and I told her about Boom Out of Lake and Art Center. She said, oh, I remember that. So I don't
she
remember.
was part of it.
I don't remember. Yeah. And there was a fabulous dark room upstairs
Oh yeah,
where I learned developing photographs and all that.
that's amazing. Thank
And
you.
you mentioned the Champagne Festival
Mhm.
at the bottom. We talked about the arts and children venues and music director Michelle. Her husband is the one that connected us with Odetta, Stan Getz, Junior Jazz. We just had this great.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that these people were here all those years ago. I love it, and I've been loving to hear about it. Also, dances were going on. There was modern dance instruction from what we found. There's also social dancing. Square dancing started at some point, unclear when, 70s maybe, there's square dances going on here. But that also became a really popular event. Also the famous coffee house, that was another great way for people to come together in the evenings and listen to some great live music and also dance. And of course, art instruction also continued. And art instruction became even more diverse with even more offerings. There is offerings for both adults and for children, and there's flexible hours to participate in those classes. So hopefully, most amount of people could get involved. Next slide. Also, continued collaboration. of course, like, doesn't stop in the founding of this place. ALCA continued to work with the museum. It started to work with North Country Public Radio in terms of getting events out there. North Country Community College started doing satellite art courses here, taught by Don Wynn, which I loved hearing about from Don Wynn himself. I think this is such a cool program. Also, the local news was another great way of getting events and information out there so people could show up. Artists in residence also began around this time. Don Wynn was one of them. I spoke to both Don Wynn for oral history and his friend Mark Paul, whom Mark worked with Don here for at least a couple of years, I believe. And we also have a quote from Mark Paul's interview coming up. But there was also outdoor excursions that got started up, including hiking, skiing, skating, things like that, which I also think is another really great way to bring people together and shows that this place isn't just about art, it's about so much more, and already the art stuff is all really amazing. Preschool, of course, was a huge part of what the Art Center was doing, and this is around the time when the New York State Council of the Arts grants were beginning to come through. They were being applied for, they were starting to fund a lot of the Art Center's endeavors, and of course, local membership was still funding a lot of what was going on here too. Next slide, please. So this is a really great quote from Mark Walt, who I interviewed on July 2nd of this year, and I'll read it. "I felt like my time at the Art Center encouraged me, validated me after college. After I worked at the Art Center, I became the artist in residence in the village of Lake George. That's when I bought this house," referring to the house I interviewed him in, "which was a rundown house. So I've been here ever since. So in some ways, the transition from painting with Don Wynn to working at the Art Center, and then finding an opportunity in Lake George, really sort of established me, and then I bought a house and really connected to this area for life." I just love that story. I think it's really inspiring. It shows that the Art Center has really impacted Mark's life, and this is not uncommon. Everybody I spoke to talked about how transformative and life-changing the Art Center truly was. And I think that is worth to have in writing, and I hope that the Art Center continues doing that amazing work and impacting people's lives for many years to come. Next slide. Also, I interviewed Sherry Nevers. This is another great quote. "The Art Center was such an intricate weaving of being with community, comparing our work with somebody else's, each of us helping each other, the teachers helping us, Jim and Sheila helping us, and the kids as well. I think of all the things that I was able to do with those workshops and the concerts, and seeing people that you love, you don't always see every day in the community. I have so much love for the Art Center and so much history. And you know, I guess I have to say it really helped me grow up. It was such a gift and it helped me grow up, and I could never not feel that way about it." I think it's also really amazing that Sherry was here as a teenager. She actually had a fun story about Stan Getz as well, where she was flipping the page music for him, and she was really stressed about it, but apparently it's a memory that she still holds on to really strongly. Another really cool Stan Getz moment from the past. Next slide, please. Then we move into the 80s. We're still having people come together of all ages for even more programming. This is when Forever Wild started up, or if that was late 70s, please correct me. But Forever Wild, of course, became a staple of the Art Center. They also started doing gourmet dinners. I spoke to Betsy Falwell, who was the director here from 1980 to 1988, I believe, and she was telling me about these gourmet dinners that were always a huge hit, a big fundraising moment. Sometimes happened, if not always happened, at great camps or other venues besides this one. Those were always a hit. Those lasted from 82 to 88, she believes. Also were succeeded by the Woodchoppers Ball, which is another fancy event with good food, a big band, and a lot of dancing. Square dancing also started to become really popular. A lot of what I read about in the 80s was how popular square dancing was, which was cool. Also, this is a sad part of what I've learned, that the North Country Public Radio recorded and broadcast a lot of concerts, dozens of concerts during this time, but people have tried to reach out to them in the past and they don't know what happened to those recordings, which is such a shame because that would be a real historic treasure if we had them. Next slide, please. This is from Betsy Falwell. "The Art Center gave me confidence to try just about anything. It impacted my life by really cementing ties with the community." And just more common themes here of connecting with others around you and also inspiring you, which is two things that the Art Center has done for so many different people. Next slide, please. Now we're in the 90s. The 90s was when decentralization started, which in other words today is this, where ALCA became the statewide Community Regrants, I think is the acronym, coordinator for the 4 counties of Hamilton, Franklin, Clinton, and Essex. And all of that is to say that this is a really profound, in my opinion, moment of the Art Center's evolution. Not only has it been serving the surrounding communities in so many different ways for so many different years at this point, now it is helping provide grants for a lot of other artists and artistic endeavors all over these 4 counties. And in that way, also becoming such a cornerstone of art in this region. And it continues in this role today. And I think it's one of the most impactful roles that the Art Center plays that I have learned about. There's also an attempt at another oral history project during this decade about the family histories of certain families around this area. We don't know where these went, so if anyone happens to know who to ask, I spoke to Ellen Boots, who is the director and who was in charge of this project. She doesn't know what happens to them either, but it would be really amazing to find these histories. And I see it as a little predecessor to myself about 30 years prior. Someone else was trying to do some really cool oral history work. If anyone knows, please talk to me or somebody else at the Art Center. And of course, popular programming consisted. We've got lots of theater, kids activities, painting, everything else that's been going on, and even more continued during this time.
We still have more boxes to go through, so maybe
Yeah,
they'll be in there.
that'd be amazing. Let me know if I'm not here. Great, thank you. This is a newspaper clipping about these family histories that we're trying to be preserved. I hope we find them. Next slide, please. Ellen Boots, this is an excerpt from her. The Art Center was good for the artists and creative people up here, but I think it created an awareness of the arts in the larger community that would not have been here without the Art Center. And I think it's really amazing to track this evolution over time, just how much more of a role the Art Center started to play in this region and how increasingly invaluable it was becoming and still is in terms of artistic facilitation and appreciation of the arts here. And also the incredible support that it gives to so many different local artists across its history. Next slide. And so most of our records are from prior to 2000, from what I've been able to find. So I've included 2000 to 2020 in this one slide here. Theater really took off during this time that we were discussing a little bit. Shakespeare in the Park became really popular. Also have a lot of cool family events still going on. This is the AC Kids Experience, kind of like an American, there's an AGT, Adirondack Got Talent, which is also pretty cool. They ran for mostly children, pretty short. It's another example of some cool programming. Yeah, the American Idol's there. Also some other stuff going on. This is somewhere in this 20-year period. It's hard to find the exact year from what we have. We'd have to talk to some different people, but the Art Center moved away from year-round programming in that year. It's because it became too pricey to keep the building in the winter. It's a shame, but of course it makes sense. And also family and children's events continued. They were still just as important as ever, but today there are far less children here, and so not as many of those are running today. Next slide, we'll have some other cool pictures. Macbeth, this is from 2010. This is a picture from 2016. Thank you, George. Pretty sure you took that. A lot of theater going on, and that is what is still a major part of the Art Center today. I love it. Next slide, please. Also another picture. This one's from 2018. Really cool costumes. Next slide, please. So why does this all matter? I think this is really indicative of a few major themes that demonstrate the Art Center's undeniable impact here. The Art Center has literally changed people's lives, and I think it's really amazing that we have those stories documented. The Art Center has supported hundreds of artists and will continue to support hundreds more, I hope. The Art Center has bolstered and collaborated with so many different members of its community, different communities, and other organizations all across the Adirondacks. And the Art Center has transformed the cultural landscape of the Adirondack region, as we heard from some of the quotes, and also just from what we have seen about how the Art Center has evolved in its role here over time. This place in its entirety, this place being Blue Mountain Lake, this place being the surrounding counties, or the entirety of the Adirondacks, would not be the same without what the Art Center has been doing for the past 57 years. And finally, I love that community and people have always been at the heart of this story, and that they will continue to be. Next up, please. this lastly is essential not only to here, but to the entirety of the Adirondacks. That might be it. Next slide. Some more fun pictures, but thank you so much. This has been great. And, if anyone has any questions, anything they want to share, it'd be a great time. I'd love to hear.
Eli, maybe you could talk a little bit about the website and what you hope to include in the website.
Absolutely, yeah. So the website, I'm still working on putting that together.
Eli, could I just step forward into the light? There we go. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay. That was in the dark. All right. The questions about the website. Yes. So a lot of what is included in the slideshow will be fleshed out in a different format on the website. I'm using a program called Story Maps from ArcGIS, which is something that Colgate gives me access to. And essentially, it's a really engaging website format where it's going to look like a web page. You can scroll down it, but there's interactive things that you can click on, such as listening to excerpts from oral histories. So I have quotes in writing here, but on the website, you'll actually be able to hear people's voices, which I think is really exciting. Also had the idea of if there's some really cool people that have been here, for example, Stan Getz, maybe like a little clip from YouTube of Stan Getz's music, just because unfortunately you don't have the recordings of them being here, but it'd be neat for people to be able to hear and think, whoa, that was here at the Art Center. I heard that live. That's really cool. A lot of writing just about, nothing too bulky, but basically what we've gone over here, the broad strokes and major evolutions over the Art Center's history. Additionally, a lot of images we want to incorporate some. There's so many great photos. There's hundreds and hundreds of things we could use, but I would like to include some of the materials that I worked with in terms of producing this, I don't want to call it a report, but this history, this story about the Art Center. Use some pamphlets, use some photos, things like that. Just some cool images to look at and interact with. Is there anything else, Marty, that you were hoping included?
I think the other piece is the photographs, and because they were shown at the open house, but it would be nice to have those also preserved.
No, that would be great. I think I'll put as many photos as we want on this site, but also for the future, I'm thinking this might be beyond what I'm able to do this summer, but eventually having an online digital database that is linked to the Art Center's website where these photos are always viewable. And then one day, if we can identify what's going on in those photos, even better, because then you can label who's in them exactly, what's going on, the year it was in, and things of that sort. But yes, there's going to be lots of photos. And I'll try to include as many as I can. So I know there's hundreds and hundreds. I'll have to see how that exactly comes out. Yes.
So, talk a little bit about how you went through this process. It sounds like there were dozens and dozens of boxes and just tons of information and data.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you cull it down into what you needed, and what was that process like?
That was mostly Marty and the other volunteers, Lenore, Boca, and Annabelle, who were going through a lot of the boxes, sorting through it by year. There was a lot, from what I understand, a lot of duplicate records, and there were multiple piles created, some of which are like, we don't need this anymore. Others were put into folders, or into piles, really. There's before we had those beautiful collages upstairs, which I encourage you to look at if you haven't seen them, of some really cool historical pamphlets and things like that. Before that, there was piles on the floor, and that volunteers sat with and sorted through for hours and hours, and then gave to me in folders, and I looked through these folders, seeing what was useful, seeing what I could pull for the history, the story that I would eventually tell, seeing what kind of images are there. So that was a lot of the first few weeks here. And then a lot of my job was really taken up by the oral histories, doing the interviews themselves, uploading them somewhere, and eventually there's going to be a lot of metadata work that has to happen there, which is, in other words, just hopefully having some transcripts for people to read, timestamp summaries and things of that nature, which is usually oral history best practice from my experience at Colgate. So I did a lot of that as well, and then a lot of my job was also going to the museum, sorting through their records there, scanning things digitally with my phone, which is a rudimentary way to do it. One day hopefully we could scan them in higher quality, depending on our purposes, but now the Art Center has every single thing, the museum has scanned in their records, which is really cool. It's partly what I did as well. And lastly, what I've been working on was the slideshow for the open house, scanning those 200 or so photos. That was also a process of going through different piles organized by year, choosing some really neat highlights and selecting what was going to make that slideshow about a couple weeks ago now, and also going through more photos and taking photos in the last few days, especially today, to populate the slideshow. And the website will be the final thing I do in the next 8 or so days. Did I answer the question?
You did, thanks.
All right.
Can we see the slideshow? We weren't here for that. Is that available?
Sure. Jean Marie, do we have time to show it today?
Sure, I mean, if you want to stay and watch it.
Well, maybe,
Yeah.
It's about like 200 photos, so it's quite a lot. But
it might be a little much for tonight, but can we put that on the schedule?
yeah. And also that slideshow, like Marty was saying, a lot of those photos I'd love to be available online. So if I can find a way to put them nicely on the website I'm creating, or even link some kind of slideshow file on there for people to look at, I think that would be really cool. And that way too, that people can sort through those and see what they recognize, and if I'm gone, tell somebody what's going on so that we can have it documented. Thank you.
Could we start it now and then people can leave? if
People
they-
can leave if they don't want to watch it. Yeah.
Sure.
You want to find it?
Yeah, it's here somewhere. This is good. Okay, hopefully it's, yeah. Hopefully it's scrolling now. Or I don't know, maybe we can make it go even faster. The open house they were doing every 30 seconds, so
Oh, no.
it's not what we want today. Yeah.
5 or 10?
Yeah,
I mean,
5.
Yeah, 5.
Let's see if that works. There we go. All right. If anyone else has any questions or things they want to add, I'm happy to hear.
We actually have a recent wonderful story that I'm going to share in fundraising. One of our fundraising efforts is there's a woman in Indian Lake that had a squatter in her home when she was in Texas, and they destroyed her home, and she had to redo it all herself. And she said coming to the classical concerts here that our sponsor helped her get through that hard point in her life for the past 2 years. And when she told me this story at one of the receptions, she got all teary-eyed. And I said, thank you so much for sharing that with us, because sometimes you don't know the impact you have. But for her to be able to come here and experience that got her through this hard time in her life.
That's amazing.
thing that the slides don't show is that this space used to be a platform tennis venue. And there were 2 basketball nets. We talk about community.
Yeah.
How about the haunted house? Did you find any?
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear about the haunted house?
Yes.
Haunted house, right?
Yes.
I think someone told me about the haunted house.
Yes.
I wish we had
Great
photos of it there.
I won the trophy 2 years. I traded it. Bobby Joe Perry was the kid in the opening photo, and he would win it, then I would win it.
That rivalry.
Who was the couple, Bob and Pat? Struther?
I remember when you closed Route 28 and we spray bans out there. Remember that?
Modern
And
dance
the
parade.
cars all had to go on the ramp.
So who was your caller for the square dance? Did you have a regular caller?
There were different groups. The experiences happened initially at the fairhouse, years before the accident.
Oh, right. I looked. Is that it?
Fewer photos from this time, unfortunately.
Well, everybody's probably got their favorite events. I don't see two things that I really liked that were repeat events here. One of them was Tanglefoot, the Canadian Roots Group. And the other one is the Dulcimer Workshop that was at the end of June. Now, I'm not an expert on dulcimers, but, and I'm afraid, does anybody know if David passed on? I heard he was, that's why they stopped, was it he?
I think it's,
He's gone?
I think it's.
Yeah. Anyway,
There are so many more photographs, and we were limited.
oh, sure, I understand that, but Tanglefoot was here 6 or 7 times, and I went every time. Yes, the last, their last tour, they had to have it in the theater so we could get enough
There are
people.
film screenings every week. Film screenings every week. I think I brought them up once, but I could have, they were ongoing, I know, for a while. That's right.
Yeah, I've got several.
These were only photos.
I mean, it's all, like, we have all that information. It's just so much. It's only so much I can put in one slideshow. It's really wonderful. Also only so much I can do in one summer, which is why, like, it's gonna be really great if we can get more people on this in the future too. Yeah, that's right. Maybe we have it in a box somewhere. I don't know.
When
I
I
just
saw the early pictures of Fuller's Garage, I was reminded of an event, an early event. There was a very large window that opened into the office of the place. We advertised everywhere to get someone to take that big piece of glass away. Finally, the day came. I marched down, stood across the street, picked up a very large rock, braced myself, threw the rock, and discovered someone had taken me up on my offer.
My memory is when we first started the renovation, there were 2 great big garage doors. So Jim unhooks one spring. Do you know how large those springs are? I happened to turn when he was catapulted, and I thought, Jim's going to die before my eyes. And he became a cat and landed on his feet.
The garage door was over there. I landed over there.
That was a hard lesson, I guess.
I thought your sideburns were so divine. It made my heart beat faster.
I actually had 2 personas. Carl Carburetor, of course, I was the famous race car driver from Europe. But I also became Jasper Jetlag when we explored aviation.
That was cute.
So my father-in-law's comment on the first time meeting Jim and Sheila was that Jim's hair was longer than Sheila's skirt.
I did want to comment that we have so many slides and negatives and black and white photos that, and we don't have any equipment to do any of the changeover, which Jenny, of course, was so nice to help us out with the museum. So it's going to take money if we try to move it to some other type of medium. And if you haven't seen the collages upstairs, those are just a handful of the posters and the presentations. There's so much there. But again, to try to digitize those, is going to take some effort and money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.